Hello and welcome to this, another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and you're listening to episode 116 with Owen McPolin, DP of Foundation Season 2. Enjoy.
So I'll just start the way I normally start, which is to ask if you have been watching anything with the downtime and stuff. Or I don't even know if you've had any downtime, because I know the UK is still kind of working.
No, I have been watching stuff. I have actually, there's a few things I've been watching. Now, I actually have a bit of downtime, because mostly when you're working, it's the last thing in the evening you really want to do is watch anything.
Right.
You've been engrossed in kind of storytelling and imagery all day, and you just want to just let your eyes rest for a while and take it easy.
Yeah.
And think about the day. And also because your kind of brain is fried, you just want to unwind. So I have been watching a couple of things. I've been watching The Bear.
Great show.
Oh my God.
Unless you have a family that is just like that, then it is PTSD inducing.
Yeah, but I come from a family of 6 kids from the west of Ireland, so it's not dissimilar from a kitchen in Ireland than it would be there in Chicago.
Sure.
I mean, but it's really well written. It's so good. The performances and the look of it is really good. It's really hard to make something that distressed look good. And it's short. It packs a punch. It's just really good storytelling and really interesting characters. Like they're doing it so well. So I've just started season 2, episode 1. Yeah.
You're in for a ride.
Don't say anything.
No.
Don't blow it, man.
There's something we'll have to get back in touch when you get to around the middle. That's
okay. Yeah. So I mean, it's really good. So I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, it's just so well written, so well constructed, and well, I love the look of the pilot and how it progresses. And I think it's episode 7, season 1, is a oneer, and you don't even know it's a oneer because it's so well choreographed. It's, because sometimes oneers can be self-conscious and they're not very well articulated sometimes because people say, oh, did you see this oneer? And it's all about that as opposed to what's actually going on. And in this case, in the kitchen, what's going on and how it leads to that moment at the end of that shot. I think it's 20 minutes long, but it felt like 2 minutes.
Yeah. Well, it's that whole era of oneers for the sake of it. I felt like never, because that what was that, like 2000? Basically, when we got digital cameras, people were like, "Oh shit, we can shoot the huge takes now."
Yeah.
But I always thought like, oh, sometimes they're just trying to be flashy. But in the case of that episode, this is just classic sort of story pacing. But when you have a cut, that's a natural point for the audience to breathe. But if you have no cuts, it's mad stressful. And that whole episode, well, a lot of The Bear, but that whole episode is mad stressful, so it absolutely fits the story.
Absolutely. And also because there would have been plenty of other opportunities in that show, in those episodes, to do something like that. But they kept their powder dry and they waited until that moment to do it. So number one, you weren't expecting it. 2, you were just, okay, let's just get into this. I know there's going to be, I think the synopsis said there's a little bit of stress in the kitchen for this episode. Talk about the understatement of the year. My wife was saying, though, she had worked in kitchens in the past. She said, listen, it's never that stressful in the kitchen, in real kitchens. But then you think about the character and you think about him and all his colleagues and what they're going through in their lives. You go, listen, it's not really about the kitchen, it's about what's going on in their lives. And that's so interesting. Anyway, it's really good. I keep going on about it if you let me, but it was just really well done, and hats off to the DOPs particularly and the director and the performers. That's hard to do, really hard.
Well, to the first point, like I said, this is the podcast to rant on. So whatever you want to, you go for it.
Yeah.
But secondly, did you know who Matty Matheson was before that show?
Nope.
The big tattooed guy.
No, I didn't. Tell me about him.
So he's a chef. He's a real chef. He's the only real chef on the show. And he plays a plumber.
Yes, and he's the fixer, right?
Yeah.
And he's a great character, that fella. there's some really good. I mean, all the lines are good, but like he has such like he just pops up now and again, shows up, fixes things like when mixers go wrong or they blow the main fuse or whatever, and then it just gets to the point where. And I hope he has more in season 2. I'm not sure. But I'm very much looking forward to that. So, who was
he's a producer as well, so he put himself in a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, you also know the authenticity of that show because it has not just a lexicon, but it has just the feeling of being in a kitchen that's stressful and that tired. And when something like that has to change, when you have to people to step up to a different kind of pace. And when, in story terms, when the main character comes in and takes over the restaurant from his deceased brother, it's all pre-established, institutionalized characters who obviously not really happy to have this new guy in, and slowly the change happens, and then it comes to that climax at that moment in that episode. So it's brilliant. And what else am I looking? I'm looking forward to The Creator, which is a new movie coming out soon.
Oh yeah, I very well aware of it.
So, and there's something really interesting about how that looks, and there's something really interesting resonant about the story, which I'm really interested in, and I think they're going to do it really well. Now, I know Greg Fraser shot it, and the director has kind of history with him. So the creative collaboration, I'm very interested in seeing what's going to come out in that.
Yeah, well, apparently Greg kind of offloaded a lot of the work to this other DP, Owen Soffer, who I think he's an American, but he's around my age, I think, his mid-30s. And I don't know if you saw this, but I actually just texted someone about this 15 minutes before we started talking, which was apparently, I'm still waiting for final. I'm going to try to get a hold of Oren or someone or Greg. I've been told I'm allowed to interview Greg. I just can't get a hold of him. But apparently they shot that whole film on the FX3.
Yes.
Sony camera. And the Sony, I don't know how online you are, hopefully not as much as I am, but boy, the Sony fanboys are really annoying about it. I bought this camera, now I can make a creator. It's like,
this big, you just have good glass in the front of it, it'll capture something as stunning as that. So, but look, listen, bottom line, the box, I mean, I'm really an advocate of this. It's great having a fantastic camera and a proven camera system that everyone understands and knows. But when you unencumber yourself with that and you try something else and you've got good glass in the front of it, you've got good storytellers at the back of it, then people will figure out, you get enough brains in the room and enough problem solvers. If any hiccups happen with the camera system because it's new or there's different issues with it or whatever, they'll solve it. They will, and that's the same case with visual effects, directing, mise en scène, the floor, working out a shot, laying it out on the floor. All that stuff can be fixed if you get enough people in the room going, well, we have no idea how to do this, no clue, but let's try something, and you never know, it might actually be quite good. And so that's what's really interesting. And yes, brilliant that Sony have that now to trumpet with such I think a really high profile film, but that shouldn't be the end all of it. It should be something else, which is the picture any good? Image quality, if that starts getting in the way, of course it'll knock you out of the story, but I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
I think it's great that they're trying something else with not unconventional camera system, but a camera system that wouldn't be used in normally a film that big, that budget.
Well, it doesn't even have SDI, so you've got to be real careful about like wiggling but
God forbid what they did in the 70s and 80s. We didn't have SDI, and God forbid you had to look through this hole, which actually had an optical image. Oh my God forbid. What are we going to do?
Well, FX3 doesn't even have an eyepiece. You have to use HDMI or the back little thingy. But I will say, to your point, like that's something we brought up a million times on this podcast, is like, it doesn't, although I do want to bring something up you said in a different interview, but production design and costuming really will put you far apart when it comes to the image. More so, like production designers DPs get the credit for what production designers do all the time.
Yeah,
and
that, yeah, you know, and I know that you get a good enough design in front of the camera, like DOPs, they have very little work to do if the design is as it is.
Yeah.
And I must say, I found that personally speaking with Foundation, but particularly in the look of that and a couple of other pictures, like I was thinking about it the other day, like what is the most unproduction designed picture that I remember even watching as a kid, and like things like, I don't know, The French Connection, right?
Sure.
Or something that is
Clerks.
Yes, scripts, the selection of the locations, and that's it. And the choices they made there were brilliant. And so similarly, if you have a highly designed piece, it's what's in front of the camera. If it's good and it works, Jesus, it'll be so much easier to tell the story. If you're bumping up against the design and you're noticing it or you're feeling it, or I don't know, and it just knocks you out of it, just kind of pushes the cue ball a bit to the left or the right, you become aware of it, and then you've lost it. It's over, you know. Yeah. Anyway,
well, it's actually funny you brought it up, because between something you need to know about me, I'm just ping-ponging. My brain goes everywhere, so we'll probably bounce.
Yes, please. Same here. I'm afraid that's what happens here too. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's funny you brought up the creator, because I do feel like the creator and Foundation have similar, maybe not sort of themes, but also, like I was saying, the production design, the costuming, both look very not similar in style necessarily, but similar in attention to detail. I'm very excited for the creator because of what I've seen in something like Foundation.
Yeah. Well, if like first thing sometimes I do when I start a gig is I go straight to the production designer. I go straight to the costume designer with the director, hopefully, and sit down with them and go, listen, push all the textures you can into it. Push all the detail you want into it, because our cameras are going to see everything. Unless you're specifically telling us we cannot see something because there's a lack of detail here, or we haven't quite figured that out yet. Then you go to the makeup artist and you speak to the you speak to the hair designer, costume designer, and say, listen, if there's a problem in the morning and one of the actors or the actresses has got a serious, I don't know, herpes simplex right here, tell me. Or tell me that they're off today, or there's something going on, or they make feel a bit pale, or there's something, I don't know, could be anything. Just let me know, because then I can do something about it. And I can think of, I don't know, the process of with the director. What angle are we going to take it from? Should we actually concentrate this side? Should we shoot front on? Or is there something in the design that you want to highlight? Tell us, communicate it. And then we can make a feature of it. And that's what's really interesting, because then then they go, oh, brilliant, that's great. I thought, I'm going to be a person who services you or the director. I said, no, you design and you push all the stuff you need into it to tell that particular character's story. And then we will highlight it or hold off on it if you want to hold a secret later. All those things, that line of communication, I think, is really great. And that's what's exciting for me. It also makes a bond between you and the performers, the designers, the hair and makeup designers, costume designers, all that stuff. Then everyone starts kind of working together, as opposed to, oh, I'm just going to do this and you're going to capture it and then I walk away from it, or vice versa. It's nice when it kind of all rolls together. And I think, like, even with the Bear and say the creator and a couple of other jobs that I'm looking forward to seeing soon, I kind of go, I want to watch that. There's something interesting coming up on this. I like it. It resonates with me. I don't know why, but it just makes me as a viewer more interested rather than the cinematographer. I hate looking at films as the cinematographer. God, it's so boring. And people always ask me that. What did you see in that made you? I said, I can't remember a bloody shot in the whole thing. It doesn't matter. If it's any good, I start to. I remember for what it is as an engrossing story.
Yeah.
But it's things, I can see all the areas that are problematic.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack that I think was excellent. Like, one, to your point, like, I think early on as DPs, a lot of people think like, oh, it's all about shot selection, it's all about lenses, but it really is about celebrating the work of everyone else. Obviously the actors, but like you were saying, the costumers, the production designers, anything in front of it's more about carrying their stuff forward more so than imposing yourself. But to your point about not remembering shots, I'm the same way, except I went and saw A Haunting in Venice a couple nights ago.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Boy, that they make some bold choices in that film. Everything is framed like that. You know, they're all shooting on like a 12 millimeter the whole time. Like it's very,
Okay.
I mean, it looks good. It's Harris Zambar Lucas, who I actually interviewed on this podcast. He did other stuff with Kenneth Branagh on Belfast.
Yes, they work together a lot. Yeah.
Great guy. I love him so much. But when I saw his name pop up at the end, because I wasn't sure, I was like, I got to call him again about this, because I was sitting there going, cool, you know?
Yeah. So, and also they, because they have a really good relationship, they work together for a while, probably, and I'm only guessing this. I know their editor, Una Nikanila, she's an Irish editor that works with Branagh a lot. And she says of her interaction with him, it's a very collaborative process. He really enjoys that process. She speaks plainly. She tells him really clearly what she likes and doesn't like in certain things, and makes edits accordingly. And I think that freedom, that collaboration, where you imbue someone with responsibility to do their best rather than just being a pure diktat, that's what makes it interesting. And I can probably see that in the cinematographer's relationship with the director, and movies like that if people have collaborated for a few pictures, you start to just not think like them, but you become unencumbered by your own ego, and you just want to riff with that director, and it becomes a far more collaborative and exciting process. Like a few weeks into season of Foundation, I worked with her. She's a fantastic director, Roxanne Dawson, and I've worked with her on all the episodes, mostly of Foundation, along with Goyer. But particularly with Roxanne, she has this lovely kind of talent to allow the cinematographer to be as open and free in their thoughts as you want. So you'd come in one day and you'd sit down across in the office, and we're prepping a certain scene, and the AD, Owen McGee, is sitting opposite. He's working out schedule depending on, the approach to our scene. Are we going to need a long time, a short time? When are we going to do it? What resources do we need? And we'd start riffing off each other. I'd say to Roxanne, listen, what if you're taking this from this person's perspective? Who's the perspective of the character? What do you want to tell here? And then she'd say something back, and then I go, well, maybe you should, and maybe you should do it this way. And then I'd stand up and we'd pace the room, and then she'd pace, and then you just get into this rhythm of actually trying to kind of work the scene out. And then she'd go away, and then she'd storyboard, and she'd come back and present it, and then we'd work it out again. So it's like an ongoing process. It's not like the director just says, here it is, here's the storyboard, here's what I'm going to shoot, and here's the coverage. It's a lot more freer, and it makes it far more interesting. And sometimes McGee just turns around and goes, I love the way that you just riff off each other, and it just works. Because it makes the story, like when you see the final cut, you can see the story that she wants to tell. And we've all pitched in. All the actors obviously have performed, and she's a former actress herself, so she know how to communicate with them and get them in their mind where they need to be for the character. And yet, in the back of her mind, she still recalls the conversation of we had all those months ago. And so when she puts it up on the floor, she'd look over to the corner and look at me, and I go, yeah, that's what we discussed. It's good, yeah. And then if it's drifting in a different direction, she doesn't even look at me. She just pull it back to where it needs to go, so that we have the performers where they are, so that the rig we've built will work, and the thoughts we had will adhere to her original idea. So it's really interesting, that kind of one step I step another, she steps forward, and it just goes like that. I don't know if I'm being articulate enough in what I'm describing.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's the process, and that's really interesting. And that's unique, I think. Every director's relationship with their camera person is always unique, but when it works really fluidly like that, makes your job so much easier, because then you have times for thought processes, and you're not worried that this isn't going to come out how I expected. You're free to make it better on the day based on the plan. Or if she wants to throw it out entirely, we know that we trust each other enough to go, okay, let's just try something slightly different on this. But that actually doesn't happen, because what you've laid down as a template before that normally works. So it's interesting, and I think camera and directors and storytellers, if they work together and get out of the way in terms of lighting and camera, and just let the story be told naturally. And it's very hard to tell people how to do this. It's really hard to describe it. The story comes more freely from the script. That sounds hard, but do you know what I mean?
No, I do actually. It's something that you're 100% right. It's very difficult to explain, and it's something that took me multiple years. I'm going to go ahead and say 8 years after college, after going to film school, to finally understand the flow state that you're speaking of, which you can't reach if there's on set, for instance, friction with your director. If you guys aren't on the same page, it's much more difficult. But also the aspect of trusting yourself. I think it's very difficult to trust yourself to know that your first instinct, something that we've said a billion times on this podcast, is technically correct is not always correct. It's more about the way you feel about what's happening. And if that feels good and it doesn't feel like that's friction, then it usually is good. And you need to learn to trust that.
Yeah. And I think, God forbid, unfortunately, that only comes a lot of the time with experience. Yeah. And with the experience, and I wish I had tapped myself on the shoulder years ago about this, but you don't know, because it's cart before the horse, or it's an oxymoron, or you can't really tell yourself this until you have the experience, is that if you relax, you can trust your instincts, whereas the noise that gets into your head, if you're not relaxed, will distract you and be discursive to your train of thought. And because of that, you're less focused, you're more working on the minutiae of a scene as opposed to the holistic element of it, which can be a certain point that you're trying to drive through into the scene or the narrative, or a certain cue of lighting, or a certain camera move. All that stuff will come far more naturally if you have clarity and less noise and pressure and friction on the set, and particularly with your director or your producer or your showrunner. If you have that, your expression, what you're giving to the show, comes far more freely, and actually you enjoy your job way more. And if you enjoy it, you just get better at it. Yeah. If you don't enjoy it, and excuse the French, if you're just fucked up that day, or it's just an awful experience, you're fighting against that, and none of the language you're trying to get across or the grammar you're trying to get across is going to come through on camera. It just never does. You're going, something awkward or sticky about that scene, we got to move on, and then it's too late. Yeah. Whereas if you stop for a moment and go, we're missing a trick here, I don't know what it is, I'm sorry to say, but we're missing something, then if the director or the showrunner or the producer on set is honest enough to go, yeah, you're right, or the actor feels it, okay, have another crack at it. Let's. I'm going to suggest this. Can we do that? And normally, most people will say, yeah, absolutely. Let's have it a go. It's another 5 minutes. It's not going to break the bank. It's not going to ruin our schedule. And then people relax a little bit, and then off you go. And then, oh, we've caught it. We've got the hook, and off we go. A quick aside, there was a DOP I knew in the UK, and she was doing her first big job at the time, and she was working with a really funny Welsh gaffer, and very experienced, really good at his job. And it was the first day, first shot, first scene, the whole thing. She was very nervous, and they rehearsed the scene, and the director turned to her and says, "Right, there you go." And she was absolutely kind of, "Oh God, okay, I know what I have to do here, but just give me a minute." And the gaffer leant over to her and said, "Put it all up, put all the set up on 246s. She looked at me, "What do you mean? Put everything up, put the desks, put all this furniture up on 246s. Get the standbys in to do it." So standbys all went in, and they started lifting all the desks and everything up by 2 inches. But it gave her 10 minutes to think. They all did that stuff. They all ran in and lifted it all. It made no material difference to the scene whatsoever, except all the actors were 2 inches shorter. But she then was able to think, hang on, this is where I need to put the key light, and that's where I need to fill, and that's where all the other, and I'm going to dim it to that level. And she had it. And off she went, and she did a stunning job. Anyway, but it shows that if you just declutter your head of the machinery and the noise, you can actually start and be more creative, because you're letting your ability to express yourself as a camera person much more clearly.
Yeah, well, it's like the the higher stress jobs, the military or whatever. Because I'm American, of course, I'm thinking military. But they always train.
What's your point of reference, Kenny?
Yeah. But they always train them to never focus. Like all the weapons systems, everything is all based on gross motions. There's no fiddly, nothing, because if you're getting shot at, you're not gonna. And a film set can be not that hectic, but in a similar way, it can be very hectic and very. So if you just knock everything down to gross motor functions, gross brain functions, it's actually better. And then you lean on your tech team, you lean on the gaffers, you lean on everyone else to fiddle.
Yeah, because on-set crews live on repetition. They live on a system. They live in a hierarchical system where they know the order, they know the process inside out to such a degree that when you come on set the first time, it's the first time DOP, you have all that experience at your fingertips. And sometimes all you need to do is turn the tap on and walk away and just let it happen a bit, and then just steer it gently, rather than starting to pull all the levers. And then by executing that, just steer it badly. And that's a fine example of it, really. As you say, the micro, the macro of it is sometimes an incumbence to the actual progress of telling that scene, and telling the shot, effectively shot, scene, story. Anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah,
I would that a long time ago. It would have taken so much heartache away.
Yeah, well, I think that the big issue, especially now, is like when you're new, not necessarily even young, but when you're new. Technology is fun. Technology is cool. And the fiddly things, and I don't know if you're this way, but I love to learn. And that concept of 80% of the work or 20% of the work gets you 80% of the way done it's so simple that you don't feel like you're learning anything. Now the next step after that is go do it. And it's like, well, I don't feel ready enough. So you start focusing on all these little photometrics and metering, and just like, oh, if I get this exact lens and this thing, and now I can go. That's the big one too. Is like waiting for permission. Once I take this class, then I can be a DP, or once I buy this camera, then I can. That you'll always. That's the first step to failure, is waiting for things. Basically, waiting for letting things get in your way, excitedly letting them in.
No, I agree. I think, and I think most people who are starting out, because there is such an advancement of technology, And because actually there is a huge amount of resources now, say online, to learn those things, you can get lost in the wormhole of that. You can just dig down. But sometimes it's actually, as you say, the practice of doing it, the practice of making those mistakes, of actually working, having learned the basics of certain things. I could be like, sometimes I sit down and I watch some YouTube videos on just color grading and what some of the best color grading techniques are.
Darren Moyston, if you don't know him.
Yeah, well, him and a few other colorists that I know have produced a lot of videos, particularly, it was Baselight back in the day when I actually first started. Now it's moved on to DaVinci Resolve and all the rest, and their free software and all the rest, and you can actually do it on your laptop at home. Yeah. Back when I started, it was a very expensive process, and it made it your time with the colorist quite valuable, because you only had them for a short period of time. It was an expensive process, and your ability to learn what the process was limited. Now the resources are far more open to you, and you can learn way more of that yourself. But as I said, you can go down a wormhole, but until you actually shoot imagery yourself and then actually apply some of those things that you learn, that you will make those mistakes and you go, well, actually, that's not the thing for me. I think the way to do this is actually collaborate with the colorist. Let them take what I have and give me an entirely different take on it. And they sometimes will come up with even fantastic and even more superlative ideas than it was ever thought initially.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is like, so I went to film school before I went to college for more film school, but we learned on 16 millimeter. And so that was the thing. Anytime we had a question, we luckily enough, this was New York Film Academy, they would just keep us drunk on rolls of film, so they were just like, we'd be like, how do we do this? They'd be like, I don't know, go shoot some tests. We were on the Universal Studios backlot, we had access to it, so they'd be, go shoot some tests, go figure it out, and then when we get it back from the lab, you'll know what you did wrong. And I think that that's something that I do think DPs on this podcast have been half and half on it, but like that time between getting the rushes back sometimes is very valuable versus having it right now, where it's like get picked to death potentially.
But also the period of time. So say you shoot something and you wait for the next morning for your dailies, and you watch those dailies. And when I shot, the last time I shot film was 2004, right? Mm. And sitting down watching those dailies, it was a complete reinterpretation of what we had shot and what we had witnessed and taken place, and the previous day when we captured it. And then when we saw it on screen, it was so much more wonderful than we'd ever imagined it could be captured like. Now with the immediacy of digital, that timeline is so much more compressed. It is immediate, as you see, and your real-time manipulation is a whole other process. It's more immediate. I have to say that I am a fully convinced and converted digital person.
These days, there's no point not to be.
Yeah, and I find I went to see Licorice Pizza about 2 years ago when it came out. I remember seeing it in a cinema in Dublin, and it was a 35mm print. And I remember noticing that the center of the print, obviously when it was either during the projection or during the dupe process, the center of the image was out of focus. And that, I presume, is an artifact of the idea that when they bulk printed those prints, either the labs did it too quickly, it was either a bad projection, the experience that it takes to get film printed, duped, interposed into neg, all that stuff, and get it projected on screen, some of that experience is lost now. And so the experience I had in cinema was pretty bad, because I just went, oh man, this film was shot on film for a reason. It was then projected badly, and it ruined the entire process. It ruined the enjoyment of the picture for me, which was a real shame, because I think it was a great film, and I love Paul Thomas Anderson, but it wrecked my experience of it. And I know that he loves film and he's a film purist and he's a brilliant director, but the end result just put me out of the story.
Yeah. I mean, that was one advantage to living in Los Angeles, was when Oppenheimer came around. I guess it's still in theaters, but the Universal Studios IMAX is technically the IMAX. It's the one that Nolan finalized it on, was in that. So I went ahead and I went to that one. That was also the only one I could get tickets to, was that or Chinese theater. But I had heard so many stories of other people going to other showings, 70 millimeters, and same thing would happen. It would the neg would break halfway through, or there'd be a massive scratch or something. They'd have to convert them to, switch to the digital projector, and everyone would get bummed out. And it's like, well, film acquisition, I can see there being a good reason for, but projection,
because then unfortunately you lose control of the quality of the image sometimes in the theaters you go to. It's you can acquire it in the highest resolution possible. You can all the processes up to that point. When you release it into the world, then you are in your control. But once it leaves in a can and goes to a theater, then you're really reliant on what happens at there, and the weaving or the scratching or the change of loops and all of that, or the change of reels, all of that, you are susceptible to it going wrong. And that just doesn't happen in digital, fortunately, because you're still in control of the quality all the way down to the presentation. Went up, we got a new telly, I don't know, a year ago. It's got Dolby Vision on it. I don't know, 40-inch screen. It's incredible image quality, and I know that the imagery that we captured has a certain level of quality and maintains that quality all the way from the very capture to the full final distribution of it and the display of it. And you can't necessarily guarantee that with film these days, because a lot of that knowledge has been lost now.
Well, and that's one reason. One of the reasons why I got a PlayStation 5 was because it has a 4K Blu-ray player. And I've got, I just counted because I have to buy a new shelf, but I have something like 340 some odd Blu-rays. And a hand, well, probably more than that, because I wasn't counting the box sets. But and because streaming, with the fast enough connection, it looks very nice. But physical media, the data pipe is so much thicker, and you really, at least I can, but you really can tell, and especially in the sound too. Well, sound's a little bit easier to do, but even so, there's a staunch difference. You have a great sound system, a really nice TV, and a physical Blu-ray, 4K or otherwise, and it really shines. And I love watching it that way, especially the Criterions, where they really do a good job of what do you call it? Restoring anything.
Because they can clean up those negs, which a lot of the time are in pretty bad shape. They can denoise them, and they can actually bring them back to almost where they originally were when they were first printed. I remember seeing a Persona on the Criterion version a few years ago, and it was like, wow, incredible. It was a digital projection now in Dublin, but it was a scan of the original neg. It was incredible. Anyway, it's a great movie, but it looked much better than I remember ever seeing it on TV, in the 80s when it would have been shown on RTE. Anyway, so capture. I think you're right. There is capture it if you want to capture on film, IMAX, any format there, even in Super 16, Super 35, whatever, and get it processed. And then if you could distribute it digitally, and I know people would have it out with you for it being a non-purist version of the intention. But I think sometimes you miss out on some of the stuff.
Well, you got, at least in, again, a huge privilege to live in Los Angeles, but you got places like Tarantino's theater, the New Bev, where he only projects film. So if you really want that, and that actually, I've mentioned this before, but like the 20th anniversary of The Matrix happened, 30th?
Yeah.
20th. And I'm massive Matrix fan, me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh shit, I'm going to go see that. So they showed it in the Dolby, not the Dolby theater, but like, when you go to the AMC, they have like the Dolby room. So I watched it and it was incredible. And then right after that, I watched it at the New Beverly, the original film print.
Yeah.
And it was just really awesome to see, like, all right, that's the exact, like, this is what this movie looked like in 1999. This is what Bill Pope wants it to look like today. And seeing the difference and seeing, like little minutia, little silly things that like I never would have thought of because I watched the movie 100,000 times, Like the one thing that stood out to me in the digital projection was that first part where they're on the phone call, your camera goes flying through the numbers. And I always thought it was just black back there, but there's actually very, very tiny numbers going by.
Really?
And it's just silly stuff like that I was like, yeah, I mean, some VFX person put it back there and we never saw it on the film print, but we see it in the digital scan.
I know. And inversely, a friend and I went to see Wrath of Khan. It came out and we went to see it as a digital projection in Dublin, in a really good theatre called the Stella Cinema in Rathmines in Dublin. And I remembered the movie. I remember seeing it in the 80s as a projection in our home cinema in the west of Ireland in Tralee, and totally enjoying it, really loved it, blah, blah, blah. And then when we saw it literally last summer, when it came out again, we could see all the set of the details. The problematic details in sets, in makeup, or Spock's ears, all of those things were far more apparent than they should have been, because the film dupes would have smoothed out all of those little creases. So there is a counter argument as well.
You're 100% right. The two that really stood out to me were in The Matrix, that initial scene where Trinity kicks all the cops in half. Yeah. You can just tell the walls are made out of plywood. You can tell it's just 4 plywood flats. Like they just painted it. It's not even like, it's not connected to the floor. It's just bad. And then the Nebuchadnezzar looks great. And then I think, the what do you call it? The lobby scene. Similarly, like you could kind of tell that's not marble. That is foam.
Yes, it is. But that's just it endured.
That was a budget film back then.
Totally, and it endured me to the film even more, because it showed my memory of the picture was completely distorted. It didn't really matter back then because the picture was so enjoyable. Now, with age and digital technology and hindsight, you go, oh, look at that. But it kind of spoiled it a little bit. I still enjoyed the picture. It's a great picture, but still, it just popped us out of the story a little bit.
100%. I did want to swing back around to Foundation, just because I guess we're supposed to, but B, even though I could talk about all,
might as well get to that.
Yeah. But I watched the first half of the first season before I got distracted doing other stuff, and then when I heard I was going to interview you, and actually, what's his name? Catal? What's the other DP?
Cahill.
Cahill. I'm interviewing him tomorrow, so yes. You can talk shit all you want, and he won't be able to respond. But I went scanning. Anyway. I went scanning through some episodes because I didn't want to ruin it for myself, but I was just kind of blasting through it. And one thing I love about your cinematography is, and actually there's a second part to this compliment, but I'll get to it at the end.
Sorry, if you don't like compliments, Steady.
I know, I'll do my best. Watching Cillian Murphy in interviews is just brutal.
Yeah, no, don't be doing that. That's just, don't go there. It's just we can't be dealing with. Carry on anyway.
But I was wondering if you or who kind of set this tone for this heavy window light motivating the majority of like these interior scenes with the brothers, and in one of your episodes, I think it was 8, there's, you know, like, or I guess it's maybe part of the second season in general, but the like spaceship that they're all in, just, you know, this very, very natural look, but still so very much sci-fi. Was it a lot of discussion trying to find that, or was that just because of the way the sets were built?
Well, I came onto it at the end of season 1, and we were shooting in Limerick in Troy Studios, and they'd built all the sets, and we were starting to get into all the spaceship stuff, because that's just the order in which we shot it. And so the ships were built. A lot of the ships, Rory Sheen, who was a designer, had built really beautiful designs and ships of various sizes and shapes. They all had one thing in common, is that he really wanted to see space outside. And Chris McLean, our VFX supervisor, was very adamant that to create this sense of movement within the ships, there would be always some reference to planets or star fields or something outside. And that would be all posted in. So we were trying to figure out, well, what's the best way of doing it? Should you just use a basic soft light coming in? Should it just be lit by the controls? What is the emphasis of the light? And I always try to find, just for my own kind of sanity, what can I start with? What can I make? What can I define the ship as? And where would the source be? So talking to Chris, I said, look, would it really freak you out if I had a really strong source outside? Because, you know, there's going to be some sun somewhere, and it's normally quite pointed and harsh and very direct. Or if it's coming off a planet, it's bounced, but it still can be quite harsh. I think it might be nice to get a sense of movement in the ship, or the ships in general. Would you mind if we got one of the hardest lights we can get and stick it on a crane, get an operator on that, and just use that as the key? And sometimes it can be intense, sometimes it's less intense, but it's always there and it's always going to move. It just gives you the sense that you're moving in space, rather than it just being, and I don't want to use the reference, but sometimes in Star Wars and in the recent shows that have been shot, they're either, it's a volume with a star field outside, and a very soft light coming in. I just wanted to feel a little more real.
Yeah.
In space, and particularly, say, in Christopher Nolan's space, and that movie that he did, Interstellar, they had this, with Hoyt van Hoytema, they had a really interesting direct light, and it felt more realistic. So let's just riff on that, see what we can get from that, and then just use that as the grammar. And then if the ship is not moving, then we can slow that movement down outside, or we can articulate it as a planet. We can do whatever we want. Just start there and just build it from there. So that kind of started us moving in a certain direction. It looked good. I thought it was too over the top. And then sometimes Chris would come in and say, listen, the ship is stationary, it's just jumped in or jumped out. It might float a little bit, so you might have to ease off a little bit on your moving lamp or lamps. And then and so we would talk like that, and we would try and find a way of whatever the effect he's putting on outside there, that I would just dial into that and make sure I give him enough, or too much or too little. I could dial that accordingly. And then as we progressed through the show, that's just kind of how it evolved. And other cameramen had other different, Carl had his way, and Tico had a different way of doing it. We all kind of settled, and that was a good approach. Because it looked good and it seemed to work. No one objected, and we just took it from there.
Yeah. And that naturalism and also the color contrast, I've noticed. Very heavy orange, very heavy blue. Not in a sort of garish way, but just it's a very beautiful contrast, especially like I was saying in the brothers kind of like dining hall, for instance. that orange sunlight coming through contrasted with like the greenish blue interior.
Yeah.
It's just very pretty.
People like you can make contrast all you want with light and shade and chiaroscuro, but you can also do it with color. And there is some amazing, really nice surfaces in some of those throne rooms and the dining hall and all of those areas. And we thought, let's just embrace the color. Like you can decide if it's sunset or midday, and you can choose all of that. That is fully open to you. You can follow a certain continuity, and if you like, there's a dining hall scene that we shot in episode 2, I think it was, when Queen Sareth comes and has a meal with the Cleons for the first time.
That's actually the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and so we wanted to do something. Okay, they're practicing how to coordinate their movements in one scene in a very austere, cold, really kind of the most monochromatic way you can imagine. And then when Sarah comes in, let's just turn it all up. Let's just put all the gold cutlery out for her, make a beautiful meal of this, and let's just make it as luxurious and beautiful as we can. So what we decided to do is we'll have the sun setting. But by the time the tone of the scene changes at the end, when she actually starts to challenge the Cleons, she wants to see their, should I say, uncanted versions in the tanks below. We set the sun so that the scene becomes cool and a little more drab towards the end. So we had a progression for the scene. There was a 4.5-minute piece of dialogue around the table. So we just wanted to reflect from the positive nature and the supercilious kind of view of royalty, and then we just took it slowly to the cold end and the more reality towards the end of the scene. So we decided to just do something a bit funky for that.
Yeah. Oh, it's a gorgeous scene. Were you primarily, was it just like kind of the main light out the window, or was there other modifiers inside towards the...
Well, there was one big key outside, a T20, and that was on a crane and on a dimmer. And then we had a very large softbox over the top that we effectively dropped the T20 down, dimmed it, and actually physically dropped it over the period of the scene. And then we just slowly brought up what was above them. And then brought all the color temperatures to the cool end by the time the scene ended. It was just done very slowly with the gaffer, Barry Conroy, and he was talking to Barry Hare, the board op, as the scene went, and he had to just make sure that every time the sun disappeared, it disappeared at a certain point in a certain line, and that's what we aimed for. And so all that communication, we had those ideas with David Goyer. He directed that episode, and he was happy to, like, let's go down that road. That works for me. It'll be cool. So let's do that. And he was a very, again, collaborative, very easygoing. Okay, give me the ideas. Give me all the ideas you want, and I'll take some, or I'll riff with some of them, or I'll go, nah, don't like that. We just kept kind of spitballing it until we came out on a solution. Scenes like that, or like sometimes you'd make a choice. Would this scene look better at night? Would it be nicer? Would it be better in the evening, or just a stark daytime? Like when we were in the Canaries, we shot out in, it's a volcanic island in Fuerteventura, where we did a lot of the scenes. And what's really interesting about that island, and the reason why many film crews go there, is the contrast is extreme, because all of the landscape is dark because of the volcanic basalt and dark ash, and the sky, obviously, and I don't know what degrees south it is, but it's pretty harsh sunlight. And so you've got this really great contrast. So, okay, let's not use any silks over the top. Let's just go really hard. Let's try and orientate the sets so that we're backlit, so we have some control, and put in a bit of smoke and really embrace the contrast. Just go for broke, because we knew the cameras could handle it when we shot on Ultra Vistas. So we knew the lenses were able to deal with that level of contrast, and they look good. And you know, just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Let the landscape do it for you.
Well, you answered one question I was going to have, but I wanted to highlight how important a dimmer board operator can be, even for quote unquote simple stuff like that. I think that's one thing that will bring you from student filmmaker to good filmmaker is having a dimmer board operator. But
well, it's true. I mean, and you're right. And also, do you know, I found the advancements of LED in the last few years, the control that you have now from the board onto the set is incredible, because you can program so much. Back when it was
wireless a lot of times.
Well, totally. And when you had incandescent before, it wasn't as accurate, and the amount of dimmer systems you'd need is astronomical and was quite prohibitively expensive. Now you have all kind of LED solutions available to you that you'd never have before, and that's all fully controllable. Like, I did a job a few years ago called Shadow and Bone, and we shot it in Budapest. Christian Pausch was the gaffer, and he had a brilliant board op. I can't recall his name, so forgive me. But one scene, it took place in a snowy landscape at night in a forest, which we had built in an interior. And the scene lasted 5 or 6 minutes. And I think there was 20 cues all in, from the top to the tail. And the director was interested in playing the whole scene out as masters and in smaller shots. But we needed it all programmed. And Christian had a small remote triggering device in his hand where he had programmed every single cue. And anytime, and he knew the scene, so it just tripped it. And every time the moment happened in the cue, that would have never have been possible, I think. Like for me, or even for like a few years earlier, if we had tried to do that, we would have had to break it up. But because we had full control of LED, and we had enough fittings in there, and we had spent some time developing the cues, we were able to do it. I don't think we would have been able to do that before.
Yeah,
I were able to.
Well, the one that I've heard a bunch that I've used is like Lumen Radio, just the iPad app. You know, you can control everything from it, and it's just I'm sure it's made everyone's lives far better, or
and
maybe not easier, but definitely better.
Yes, infinitely better. And I think also it allows directors and DOPs particularly to kind of go, we can actually do it, and realize and not shy away from being quite ambitious in certain cues, and actually building them and actually playing an entire scene. Better for the actors, better for the rehearsal, better for the mise en scène, better for the crew, because everyone knows from top to tail all the processes, all the performances can be lined up to cues, and therefore they can all happen at the rate the actors want, and we can modulate that depending on how they change it. Rather than it all being like the actors have to hit a certain mark at a certain point at a certain moment, it's actually driven by the performance. It's the other way around because it's flexible.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. That has changed a lot, I think, in the last few years. Anyway, for me, now, maybe other DOPs would say that's been around for years, but for me, I think it's a huge difference.
Do you, was there a lot of difference between the ways you guys shot season 1 of Foundation and season 2, or was it kind of a continuation creatively?
Well, I think creatively, well, it's really hard to say, but I mean, I would say when you start a job, you're always looking for ways to make it better. How can I because I know I've seen the other episodes, I've seen how they've been lit. Is there any way of making this? Are we missing a trick? Is there another way of telling this more clearly, the story or this spaceship or this interior? Is there something I can do within the scene to make the scene just kind of work for what is coming out of their mouths? Like there's a scene, which I'll try not to spoil, in episode 8. I think it is, no, episode 7, where Hober Mallow jumps into an execution. and there's an explosion. And all of the royals, including the Cleons, run into the throne room, and a lockdown happens. Now, normally the throne room is lit from one side or the other, direct light or whatever. But we wanted to show the throne room in a very different way. What would happen if a bomb goes off and everyone ushers you into a safe room? How different does that look from how it would look ordinarily? So we're thinking, well, how can you make a throne room look like it's shuttered? So then we thought, hang on a second, why don't we just light it all from 3 foot above, from the floor down, for 3 foot down, so all the light is coming straight from below the line, below their chests, below chest height. And so you would imagine, hopefully, the idea is all of the shutters or protections outside the windows have come down to a certain level. So all the light is cross-lit. It's a far more severe light. It's less flattering. It just gives you a different feeling inside the throne room rather than the large streaming daylight that would come in naturally. It's far more, it's darker, obviously, but it's far harsher, and it's coming from both sides. And it looked a bit more severe.
Yeah.
And that worked. But
and it's not the Hunt for the Red October thing, where everything just goes red,
Everything goes red, yeah. And you want to try something else because then once you go down the red route, you're kind of painted into a corner, and after, I don't know, 2 minutes of watching red, your mind forgets about it, and you're effectively in a black and white environment then. And I think that's, for me, I think that's just, I don't know, you're throwing away some really interesting tools right there because you're just using one color. So maybe it's the shape of the light, the direction of the light, rather than turning it straight to red. Like sometimes when there was a red alert, you'll see that it isn't actually quite red. It's actually a more amber color because like certain issues with some of the sensors we're dealing with, if it's too saturated with red and you want to change your mind in a grade or you want to nuance it a bit, you can't.
Hilariously, old red cameras were really bad with red.
They were. Oh, I remember the first time I ever shot on a red camera was the red one, and we were shooting it. It was 2011 or something like that, and it was a nightclub scene, a rave. We got in a laser. We pointed it at the crowd. They're all dancing, whistles, hats all off their heads, delighted. It all worked great, and we pointed the camera straight at the laser, and it swept through the camera, and we did some other shot. Yeah, and the camera assistant went, "Oh, and there's a bit of dirt in the lens there. I can't seem to get it off." And I was going, so we cleaned it, nothing was coming off. So we took the lens off, and of course, we looked right into the sensor, and there was a clean hole burnt right through it. And this plastic snot-like substance leaking down the surface of the sensor. So we phoned up Red in LA, and we said, we have this problem. It looks like there's a hole in the sensor. And without batting an eyelid, 2 seconds later, the technician who spoke to us said, "You pointed at a laser, didn't you?" And we went, "Oh, yes, we did. Yeah, I know, we've had that problem. We'll send you a new sensor tomorrow and it'll be fitted the day after. You'll be fine." And that was it.
Damn.
So, bam, they were very good.
Service.
So I never pointed a red camera at a laser again. When I learned my lesson, it worked out fine, but it's great. When you fuck up, you might as well fuck up really royally and make huge mistakes. You might as well just go bananas and own it and enjoy it.
Yeah. I know we're getting a little late for you. So do you?
No, it's okay.
Well, so if it is okay, I have two subjects to go. The first one being, I really appreciate it. Thank you. I was working on I gotta be real careful here. I was working on a pitch for a movie, and I was editing the video pitch. And what's funny is, this has all kind of come full circle for me, because all of the stuff they were having me edit together, I had never heard of Foundation before this. I didn't have Apple TV, but it was Foundation, Dark City, elements of, I think Blade, but definitely Batman. It was just all the Goyer stuff. And the person I was working, the person I was working for is like incredibly famous. Like everyone knows this person. So I was just like, do you know? Why don't you just ask Goyer to direct this? Like, what do you?
Yeah, it'd be much simpler. Goyer would be very flattered and delighted that you actually subconsciously chosen all his kind of main pieces of his work, both writing and directing and all the rest. And he loves Goyer is a very nice man and very collaborative and very dry wit, very nice fella. And when he doesn't like something, he'll just say, nah, don't like it, change it, don't like it. There's something wrong here. And I go, cool, all right. What? Give me something you'd like. So I like this element of this movie. I like this. This is the look. And then we'd feel around a little bit. Yeah, that's it. Cool. It looks cool. Well done. I like it. It tells a story. Get on with it. Do it. And then it allows you total freedom to do what you do best. And therefore, because it's like what we spoke earlier about the freedom, you're not afraid to pitch stuff at him and to say, listen, David, I think this is going to be much better if we do this like this. And you go, all right, yeah, okay, cool. And then he'd say, well, actually, I don't like it that way because in the story here, it's really particularly important that this be set at this time of day or in this location. And I want it to feel a bit like that. Okay, cool. Okay. And he can articulate that in story terms. And then we can liaise like that. So that's really good. Rather than just saying, here, this is just going to look good. There's always a reason for it. And if he bumps up against it, he'll tell you. He won't, and not in a way to hurt your feelings or anything, but to say, well, actually, this is the reason behind we wrote it this way. And he has a lot of integrity when it comes down to the script, and he'll defend it to the hilt because he and his writers spent so much time formulating it, and as you know, spent an awful lot of time developing the scripts and getting them to the point where they're at. And for us to come in and trod all over them, he will defend them in a way and in a way to kind of ensure that what we're doing photographically isn't going to undermine the story. So I think that's really cool. And I think all the other DOPs would agree with that. That approach is just refreshing, actually. It doesn't happen very often, to be honest.
Well, that kind of is what I was going to get at, because like he's had a hand in making so many of the, I know people are divisive about Dark City, but I watched the director's cut and it looks great. But like, your Batman's, your Blades, your everything, some of the Marvel stuff early on, like,
yeah,
he's had a hand in creating some of the more enjoyed, let's say, pop culture kind of touchstones. And I was wondering if you had kind of an insight into, and with Foundation as well, it's fantastic. I was wondering if you maybe if there was something that you working with him kind of you could point at and say that's probably one of those things that gives him such a that it seems to work most of the time. Like, what is he doing that makes that work a lot of the time?
Well, I think like David, he was a showrunner in season 1, and he directed one episode, which I partially photographed. So I only had a relationship with him in terms of DOP showrunner. So he would show up for scenes that I was shooting for Roxanne, with whom I worked on season 1. And he would bring, perfectly honestly, he'd bring scenes and shots from other episodes that were shot by other people and directed by other people. He brought them to us as a showrunner, and he'd say, this really works, and this is why I really like it, and what I like about it, and this is why. And then he'd say, this scene here, this is why I think this doesn't work. I don't like this for this reason. He's very clear about, by showing an element of what and actually being able to show it to you and articulate it clearly by showing you the scene, either on his iPad or later on a monitor. So you get a very good insight into him as a showrunner, and we get instruction as to his aesthetic for the show by those conversations. So then in season 2, when I worked with him as a director DOP, he'd say, listen, Owen, I'm a really good screenwriter. and I'm really proud of my screenwriting, but I'm not as confident as a director. So I'm going to lean on you to help me out telling the story visually. And I say, listen, pal, you've written the story. It's really clear what you need to say. You've got really good performers who know their characters. Just rehearse that scene. I'll always be there on the side, quietly in the corner of the set during rehearsals. And he would rehearse the lines, and they would have discussions, and they'd go deep dive into the meaning of all those lines and the movements and the screen direction. And he's really, really on those moments. Because he experienced it. He was in the writer's room for all of that. Now he has to interpret it as a director. And how do you lay out the scene? How do you block it? And all of those things, he would openly say, well, I'm unsure about how this is going to work, and I want you to help me to be part of that. And I would normally say to him, just let it flow, let them rehearse, see how the scene gets up on its feet, and I'll come in only if there's something going photographically or it's going to really trip us up when we have to go and shoot it. Otherwise, I'm going to keep my hands off this, because I don't want to influence what is actually happening on the set, because sometimes, and more often than not, it was really good because the lines and the scene were coming out really well. Only once or twice have I ever had to go in and go, if that character goes over there and stays put in that corner, we're going to be in trouble, because there's no hole in the side of that set. There's no windows, there's no source of light. There's going to be some reason that's going to be hard for us to capture that. And so he'd go, right, okay. So then he'd talk to the actor, and we'd try and find a way of getting it into a position that we know we can do what he wants to do with the performers, and I can get the cameras in. Because we're 2-3 camera show, you know. And speed is of the essence, and we have to be able to light it in a way that is both aesthetically good for the story, looks good, and is quick. Can't hang around. There's no time for that. We have really enormous resources, but time is always our enemy. And that's the only time I would ever really, I would quietly have a conversation with him about that. And he'd look and go, is that going to work for you? I said, totally. And then we'd go away and say, we'd try and figure out, is there something else we can put into the scene to just lift it visually, do something else? Is there a move you're interested in? Is it a pan, or is there an edit? Is there a lighting move or a cue? Is there something that we can just go, let's just change it up here a bit? There's something we can do a bit groovy halfway through the scene. Is there something? Or is it just straight? And he'd always be open to that. And that's really interesting, because then we have a really big challenge. Then we have to go, I'd talk to Barry, the gaffer. I'd say, right, Barry, you know what? We've got to do something really interesting here. And we have to do a really interesting trick. Like, I'll tell you one story, and I won't hold it too long, but
hey, I'm on your time, man. You go as long as you'd like. I'm loving this.
We were filming in Lanzarote in a cactus garden, where one of our characters, I think it's in episode 2, Brother Constant, arrives in this small town, sets up how would you say it? Sets up a sign to advertise the Foundation's religion. She gets unwanted attention from the locals who want to run her out of town. She's cornered, is chased through town, cornered at a certain point, and is about to be attacked. And then in the script it says it turns from day to night. And a spaceship appears overhead, a beam of light shines down upon the crowd, and
I have this written down on this note right here. I wanted to ask about that scene.
It flies down, eventually lands down, and then preaches to the crowd, has a fireworks exhibition, and then converts the crowd, and then they're taken back up on the ship and they fly away. Now I was going, how the hell are we going to do this? And so Goyer had said it would really be great if we could do the change from day to night in camera. I was going, yeah, but oh my God. So it's exterior nighttime or exterior daytime in a very large open air environment. How on earth are we going to do that? So we were knocking heads. We'd visited the set numerous times. It was 2 days and one day split in the night to shoot the whole thing. It was a big scene, a lot of resources, a lot of crowd. And then we thought, why don't we shoot it so that we back the scene into sunset? And then once the actual daylight fades, the real daylight, we can take over with our own ambient sunlight, evening light, and then we can switch that over literally in camera to nightlight. So that's what we did. But we had to make sure that when we did the turnaround from day to night, we only had a 40-minute window to do it.
Right.
That's the only moment we could do it, because there'd be enough ambient in the sky and enough power from the lamps. We had 4 20Ks and 2 soft suns and 3 cranes with backlights and all the other ground lighting, basically to dim one system out and the other to come up in camera. We were just, it was the most frightening moment, I must say. Because I kept saying to David, I said, David, we've got to hit this point. Otherwise, we've blown it. The producer used to show up, Laurie Borg, and go, do you really need this many lights, Owen?
You're like, yes, shut up, yes.
Yes, we do. So we did. And the transition worked. And then we carried on, right? We carried on shooting. It all was working fine. And then one of the camels that was in the background decided that he didn't want to be there anymore and took off through the crowd, which parted in time, and ran away with its owner chasing after it. And it stepped on the main water main feeding the cactus garden. A shot of water went flying up into the air as the water main burst. Everyone scattered. The water landed on the ground, flooded all the cable of distribution, and all the lights went out.
Jeez.
And I looked at David Goyer, and David Goyer looked at me. And he went, oh my God. And I said, it's okay. It's okay, right? Don't worry. What's the worst that can happen? And he goes, this is the worst thing. I know, but don't worry. It'll be fine. We'll get the camel back. I'm sure he'll behave, and we'll dry the cables. It'll be fine. Just, there's nothing we can do. Sometimes shit happens. Listen, enjoy the moment. And we went,
quick break.
Yeah, a quick break. Have a cup of tea. We'll be fine. And then, of course, we plugged the water main, got the camel back, dried off the extras, lifted the cables out of the water, dried off the distribution, turned the lights back on, and we carried on. Maybe an hour later, and we've completed it.
Yeah, there's a I think he's a gaffer in LA. I think he's in LA, but he invented something called the swamp box, which was literally for that kind. It's just this plastic thingy that you're supposed to put all the distros on for that exact reason.
I know. Well, we've thought in Lanzarote, and one of the driest volcanic islands that there is, with a good summer evening light, we would never really be inundated by water. We never saw.
Right.
Here you go. Sometimes these things happen, and you kind of, and that's the one thing we've said about earlier. You kind of have to be a little more relaxed about it and kind of just look at the bright side, because sometimes the worst disasters are going to happen, right? And there's nothing really you can do about it except kind of smile and just go, listen, it's okay. It's only a movie. There's worse things in the world that can happen, and we will fix it, because there's a lot of people around here, and we will find a way of fixing it. And you do. Invariably you do. When those disasters happen, there's a way of fixing it.
Yeah. Well, and there's also like, a handful of DPs have mentioned how the era of the screaming either DP or director, whoever, is starting to apparently kind of go by the wayside, just someone blowing up on set for whatever reason. But also for people listening, like being that person immediately removes any respect or trust they had in you when you blow up over something. Like if someone shoots your dog, yeah, you're going to scream at them. But like if, water main blows and you start screaming at whoever to fix it. It's like, that's not, no one thinks that person deserves this. Like, this was not their fault.
No, I know. I think what that is sometimes is manifestation of kind of it's just a built-in insecurity sometimes, and a frustration and stuff like that, and people can lose their heads, and that's a problem, because one, it's just not tolerable, but two, it isn't going to make things any better on the set. And also people like all your sparks, all the people there working for you, all the camera crew, they're looking at you and the director, and you're looking at the director for guidance, and sometimes all you need is just a stopgap, a valve to kind of go, look, it's okay, it's all right. I mean, you could never predict something that's going to go wrong like that, or many other things that happen on a daily basis. But if you're kind of, if you feel confident enough in your own ability, so if it does go wrong, there's another solution. Or trust in your team to go, well, we've got a really good team here. They're going to suggest something. Or the director says to you, do you know what, there's another way of doing this. Or you say to them. So I think it's not just a matter of calm heads. It's just by having the trust in yourself and understanding that these things are invariably going to happen. Like, because you're in the center of human activity, mistakes are going to happen. There's things you can't ever factor for and plan against. You just have to use your ability to fix them on them in the moment, and not worry that you can't. Because if you do that, then you're done for. You'll never pull yourself out of it. And then people will, and they will look to sometimes the superior, or you will look to the crew to give you that, or you to give them guidance, whichever way the dynamic flows, and you will fix it. But if you are not that person, and your crew, and they don't trust you, or they feel that you're being just unhelpful by your attitude, then you're never going to engender trust in them, and certainly neither should they. Yeah. And the work will reflect that. Totally. So that's kind of the bottom line, isn't it? Really, that you can apply that to any aspect of your life, not just the process of filmmaking. Yeah. But obviously, time to time, you do get like pissed off, and you do get, oh man, this is not working. And sometimes I do find myself kicking myself up the arse, going, this needs a bit more energy. There's something wrong, and I didn't find it there that day. There's something, no one else might notice it, but you feel pretty shitty about yourself. Going, there's a moment here, and that's where the energy, that's where really brilliant, and like some of the best DPs in the world, like, I don't know, people who have little resources or have enormous resources, but the imagery they still put out is just like, how the hell did they do it? And we have this list of guys. Like, I was thinking the other night, who are the, and maybe I've asked this other people, who are the people that really influenced me? And I was trying to scratch my head, and it comes down to, like, there's a bunch of European cinematographers. I don't know if you know them, like a guy called Peter Sabinski, or Sławomir Itzak, or Sven Nykvist, or Philippe Rousselot. And
I know the last two.
Yeah. Sławomir Itzak, he would have shot some of Kieslowski's pictures, like a short film about killing, and he shot King Arthur as well, and Polish DOP, really fantastic DOP. They all came from low budget, zero budget, like just making movies with their directors in Eastern Europe and Central Europe with no resources, but still making them look amazing. And then there's the other, which is the more Western style of cinema, who have had a lot of resources and really good training, and they've had the Hollywood structures to train them, like Doug Slocum, Vilma Sigmund, Jordan Cronenweth, Caleb Chanel, Gordy Willis, Barry Sonnenfeld, all of those, all those people. I've seen movies from all of them as a kid, and then I would have seen also all the Eastern European movies as well, because I was in the west of Ireland with a really small cinema, but we got movies from America and movies from the East a lot. And they were all mixed up. It wasn't just a monocultural visual thing. It was really a mixed bag. And I think that's where I got my sensibilities from anyway. My interest.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of those names. I'm 100% with you. I actually got to interview Jeff Cronowitz months ago. So that episode's out if you care. But I'm going to flip it around on you. You actually had influence on my cinematography career.
Oh.
And that is because you shot my favorite episodes of Doctor Who.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. That was a while ago.
The Doctor's Wife, by far, is probably one of my favorite episodes. The Night Terrors was great. Yeah, well, now, yeah. He's not my friend. An acquaintance of mine married her. It's just a buddy. Like, I turned around one day, I was like, you're married to who?
The loveliest human being you would meet. The most down-to-earth, really funny, like, bundle of energy you'd ever... Like, that most of the time, it's stay still, Karen, will you? You hit the mark and stay still. Oh, she was so full of energy. Very tall, very elegant. And Matt Smith, of course, he was brilliant. Some days he would come in because it was quite densely written. There's a lot of dialogue, and he would learn all his lines for the week ahead on the Sunday night. And incredible. He would have learned, I'd say, 60 to 80 pages of dialogue over one afternoon. And by the end of the season, I did 5 or 6 episodes, I think, near the beginning of his tenure. Boy, was he tired. But bloody hell, he could turn it out. I mean, the performance, the energy was just incredible. It was brilliant. He was both amazing.
Well, and I wanted to know, because that was with Matt Smith coming in, that was when it seemed like the BBC started to care about the production value of the show, because all of David Tennant's stuff was fun, but it was still very early BBC, no budget kind of look. And then
I know there was a lot of spit and sellotape, but I think they realized that it needed a little more. It needed to change a little bit, and so they brought in a director with whom I had worked with on a job called Little Dorrit, and Adam Smith was his name. Really good, really interesting director. And then he said, "Oh no, I'm going to do these first few episodes of Doctor Who. You're in Dublin. It's Wales, is only over the road. Get on a boat." I said, "Jesus, why not?" And so Stephen Moffat was the writer. He was this kind of showrunner at the time, and he encouraged us, do what you want, make it look good. There isn't much more money, but if you really need something, tell us. So when we started, we chose a different camera system. It was shot digitally, but it was shot on,
right?
It was the original D21.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That was the first few episodes. It was the mechanical shutter version of it. We got hold of that, and we also wanted to shoot. They redesigned the TARDIS, and so there was a lot of work put into the lighting of that, because that was the core of the show. And so I know there was a lot of exterior and stuff, but that was, if we can get the TARDIS right. And again, it came down to this idea of simplicity, because the set was designed to be a kind of a central hub where the main controls were, and then all of the outer shell of the set recessed in a kind of like an onion around that. So I thought the key to making that look good was just make the center of it. Don't worry about the walls. Don't light them too much. Don't worry about all the other extraneous stuff. Don't try and show this wonderful set. Just show the middle, because that's where the performers are going to be all the time. That's where your eye is going to go.
That's smart.
And if you get that right, even though it was harsh sometimes, and we had to control it with frames above, even though it was quite hot down lighting and all the rest, and just get in there when we get in for close, we just kind of softened it off as best we could. Just make the core of that where your eye needs to go, and don't worry about the rest of it. The rest will light itself. And that's what we did for that. And then all the rest of the exterior stuff, we tried to use as much negative fill as we could and give it as much shape. So all the exterior stuff, we hired some scissor lifts and Manitous, and rather than like blow all the cash on exterior jennies and lights, we just extracted a lot of light. We just cut it off and negged it as best we could in the interiors or locations and all the exterior stuff. And then chose to shoot as much at night as we could. And that was it. That's all we did.
Yeah. Well, what was that episode, God Complex, where they're in the hotel?
Oh, yeah. Jesus, that hotel. That was like in a tiny hotel off the coast. I can't remember, Ilan Didnau or somewhere like that on the coast. Quite a grim area, or a hotel, should I say. A beautiful area, but the hotel was pretty run down. And again, small spaces, a lot of story to tell. But then we went back to studio and we were able to modulate light and create some really interesting interiors. So just take the ancillary stuff away, concentrate on the performer, and then build out from there. That was it.
Yeah. Would you, now having done a show with as much polish and loveliness as foundation, would you have done something different now with that knowledge on an older show like that way back when?
Oh God, I don't know. I think sometimes the choices are really clear in front of you. And you kind of just have to make them. I'd hate to go back and try and, if I did it again, I'm sure I'd do it slightly differently. But then it was successful, so I don't really want to tinker about it, tinker with it too much. It's like you do a piece of work, you do your best with the collaborators and the performers and the director, and then you just let it go, right? It goes off into the world and you say goodbye to it, and that's it. It's done and it's over. And then sometimes it just comes back, like you just brought up a few episodes of something I'd long forgotten. And you go, Jesus, someone's really enjoyed that. Someone's noticed that that I didn't do something wrong, that it actually endeared, it told a story and it endeared itself visually to the person watching it. And that's great. That means I didn't go completely in the wrong direction. I followed my instincts enough to kind of go, well, that worked.
Yeah.
Whereas if you kind of try and go, I think one tries to go back over, and I have had loads of failures, loads of disasters, and you kind of go, oh God, I wish I'd done that differently. But you take that knowledge and apply it to the next one. Going back and looking at it again, at least you take the knowledge of the mistake and use it going forward. And that's enough. And not to let kind of the doubt of what you've done wrong and wishing to change it. Because if you try and emulate, it's like trying to emulate your favorite cameraman or your favorite director or your favorite storyteller.
Right.
You just say it with a different voice. Your accent is yours. Your voice is yours. You can't really imitate it. And if you do, you're going to make a balls of it. You make a complete hames of it.
To that point, initially when I said that you had an influence on me is because those episodes came out right when I was about to leave college, and I was a big Doctor Who fan. I was having to let's say source it in a way that the BBC wouldn't like, and but I remember watching the old David Tennant Doctor Who, and then your first episode comes out, and I was just blown away with the difference in quality, and I was just like, oh. And for some reason, that felt way more accessible. Like it felt like mentally being there and watching that happen, and watching like Top Gear and kind of getting a feel of how like the BBC worked, and it was a great documentary. Just for some reason gave me this creative boost where I was like, I feel like I can do that. Not that it looked simple enough for a student to do, but for whatever reason it gave me a lift.
Well, that's good. I mean, if that's the energy it can imbue on someone like yourself or others, and it gets you on a path, that's great. Like I've seen loads of pictures in the past, and I go, "Wow, that just looks so good. What have they done to achieve that?" And normally when you look into it and delve down, and normally these are pictures that I would have seen growing up in the 80s and the 90s. It comes down really, I think, like the solutions they found were just so simple, and they were so resourceful and elegant, and they had all of those, I suppose, adjectives that people say, oh, that's of course what they've done, but you never really know that. You'd think that they've spent millions of dollars and they've spent huge amount of rigging time and setups to do that, but sometimes the most memorable shots, the memorable story points, the memorable moments in cinema are done from the most simplest things. And you go, oh my God. And it kind of pops that myth a little bit that that they had everything. They didn't. Some of those movies that influenced me the most were done with the lowest of budgets and the shortest of time, but just really ingenious, really smart storytellers, really smart approaches to it. And that condensation of intelligence to tell in a shot, to tell that moment, it's like, that's incredible. You have to think in a different level for that. And sometimes it just comes down to thought. Sometimes it's an accident, a lucky accident. But if you have the idea and it's strong enough, camera person or the designer won't get in the way. They'll just it'll resonate. And so when I was working with Adam Smith on those episodes, we were left to our own devices by Mr. Moffat and told to bring what we had, and no, because there was some expectation, but not a huge amount. Like, we were, I don't know what age at the time, but younger and very unproven payer, I must say. Me particularly. Adam had done some work, and he was recruited because I think he wasn't the traditional director that they would have normally expected to recruit. And he, in turn, wanted someone who wouldn't be the usual choice. And so I was lucky enough to get the call for that. And so that dynamic helped shape the look of that, and it helped shape Matt Smith's introduction to Doctor Who, which was very successful.
Yeah.
So I'm proud to be I was certainly very proud to be part of that. I was very lucky. A lot of it was luck, I'm afraid.
That always seems to be the case, right? What's the phrase? It's like, basically, it's not a phrase if I have to summarize it, but it's basically like, you can only be so prepared, and then luck strikes, and that's when, that's an opportunity works for you, or whatever. Such a terrible retelling of whatever that thought is. But
now you've mentioned that, here's a little story that I love telling, and some people may know about it, but I was a fan of Vermeer, and I still am. And I went to that show in Amsterdam in the summer, which was incredible. But there is one of his paintings in the National Gallery in Dublin, and it was originally part of the Beit Museum, or the Beit collection, which was it was a very wealthy family that had that painting hung in his house in South County Dublin, and it was stolen by a notorious gangster called the General many years ago. And it was ripped from its frame and rolled up in a tight roll, placed in a tube, and was hidden in the Dublin mountains for a number of years. And it was not recovered until it was recovered by the Antwerp police in a drugs bust, for which it was being used as collateral for a drug deal. Anyway, the National Gallery of Ireland, to whom the painting had been bequeathed after Sir Alfred Beit's death, went over to Antwerp to retrieve it, and they unrolled it and laid it over a light box and discovered there was a tiny hole in it. And they went, oh God, oh no, it's damaged. Besides the frame damage, edging. But the curator went, no, this is something more interesting. And it turned out that the hole in the painting was the vanishing point of the perspective of the painting, right? And they never knew how Vermeer did it, but what he had done is he had obviously chalked some wool and had threaded it through the vanishing point and had drummed effectively the lines of perspective on the painting and filled the hole with either paint or varnish for it to be obscured. And he told all of the other, I think he got word out to all the other museums around the world, and obviously the Met in New York and the Rijksmuseum and where all the other paintings were. And they found several similar holes. And the beautiful irony of all of this is that even the general who used the painting, the criminal, and had actually an endearing love of art himself, had unwittingly discovered one of the techniques Vermeer had used 400 years earlier for the creation of his amazing perspective in his paintings. So even by the most unlikely of ironic accidents, you can find and discover amazing things. And I just love that idea. I think it's just so bizarre and wonderful. And I think it's really something that is indicative of our process of filmmaking.
100%.
I don't know why, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I love that. Have you seen do you know Penn and Teller, the American magicians?
Yes, of course.
Penn Jillette actually made a documentary called Tim's Vermeer. There's this Tim's Vermeer, and there's this American dude who believes that Vermeer made it. Have you heard of this thing?
I've heard of the documentary. I haven't seen it.
Oh, you might have to pick it up on Blu-ray. I can ship it to you if you want. I got the Blu-ray, but it's a
go on,
find it. But it's a great documentary about how this guy feels that Vermeer was using essentially a camera obscura and a little prism, and he just would paint a real scene, you know. And then so what this guy did, he's not an artist. He went and replicated what he thinks Vermeer used and does it himself. And they're like, "Can you paint?" He's like, "I can't draw for shit, but I can do that."
But I can do that. So maybe there was certain, I mean, you can delve deeply down into it, but there is little circles of confusion, and there is pointillism, and there is really unusual painting techniques, but it keeps changing all the paintings, so you can't ever argue it was one.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, and just now, I always thought, oh, that must have been how I did it because it's such a good replication. But just hearing about the little pinhole thing that goes, nope, probably not then. Or it was a combination, or maybe it was, who knows?
And it only
back, maybe.
That's right. And in some ways, there should be a little bit of mystery because that's what's so endearing and enduring about the paintings. Obviously, for light and the subjects there are, but you still discover other ways of doing things. It's just amazing. And even if you discovered 400 years later, great.
Yeah. Well, that feels like a very good place to stop. I would love to have you back and keep chatting because I feel like we could go on for more hours. It's late for you, so
it's okay, no problem. I'll put the dogs out and see if they're all asleep, and I'll get to bed myself.
Fair enough, man. Well, please stay in touch. Like I said, love you,
Kenny.
Love to have you back next time you.
Not at all. Any time, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by Pro Video Coalition. As this is an independently funded podcast, we rely on support from listeners like you. So if you'd like to help, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/frameandrefpod. We really appreciate your support, and as always, thanks for listening.